Good evening. My name is Christian Tony, and this is the Notes from a Guidebook podcast. In this podcast, we'll discuss all things fly fishing related, tips and tricks, and a little bit of advice for when it gets hard. My name is Christian Tony. I'm your host. You can find me on Instagram at fishin.christian. That's FISHIN.Christian, CHRISTIAN, and over on the Twitter at flyfishpoddy. That's FLYFISHPODDDY. Have you ever wanted to find a hookup in a hopeless place? And no, I'm not talking about the bar or the dance floor, bathroom stall at that one gas station. Get your mind out the gutter. What about wondering how close is too close when fishing on the water? Is that guy over there too close to me? Am I too close to this person? And then lastly is, what do I bring for a day trip? What do I bring for a day trip if I'm being guided? Is there such thing as overpacking? Well, we're going to unpack all of that in today's episode. But before we get started, if you're new here, please consider subscribing or following. It's free and it ensures that you never miss an episode. And then if you do like it, leave a cute little review. Maybe I'll read it, maybe I won't. I will respond to it though. You have my word. And if you have a question you would like answered on the podcast, please drop it in my DMs and I'll do my best to answer it. Our first topic on today's episode is finding hookups in a hopeless place. And again, I don't mean stumbling up to the bar on last call, trying to slip your number to the girl down on the corner or the guy, depending on who you are. Or you're at a middle school dance and the one slow song comes on and you've been waiting to make the move on your crush all night and you're just searching to make eye contact across the room. I'm talking about finding fish in places that don't look fishy. And for all of my audio viewers, fishy, I hit that with air quotes because that's what it is. I'm sure all of us have ran into a time where someone says, "Oh, why are you fishing in there? There's no fish there. The water's too small," or "I've never seen any fish in there." This is what I kind of quantify as a hopeless place. A place that you don't necessarily fish at often because you don't consider it a spot to hold fish, or just a spot that you would never think to fish in general. If I've learned anything in my experience as a fly fisherman, as a guide, mostly as just a fisherman, is you should be prepared to explore. And I know you've probably heard the old sayings of, it's a different river every time you fish it, and no river's the same today, yesterday, or tomorrow. And it's a really cheesy saying, but it does have some merit to it. It is kind of true. Not to get overly nerdy or anything, trout need about 2 feet of water to survive in. And I'm not talking about just them living in 2 feet of water. They need to be able to move between a super shallow run, right, of about a foot of water, even less in some cases, to an area that has about 2 feet of water in it. Trout need 3 things to survive. They need to love, they need shelter, and they need food. And being able to move in and out of water where they can find all of those usually means that they will survive, and most of the time they will thrive there. Now, a lot of the fish that we're talking about here are small stream fish. Here in western North Carolina, for instance, brook trout can be found all over the Blue Ridge Parkway, and some of the water on the Blue Ridge Parkway is like half a foot deep, maybe. But the fish will move in and out of those runs into the deeper pockets to seek shelter, to find other trout, and to eat. They can sit in those big pockets and they can ambush prey when they come through there. The underground makeup or structure of the river can change. So, what if the water is lower than it was the last time you were out? How does that affect the hole that you fished? What if the water is higher than the last time you were out? How does that affect the water of a fish? How do you choose what water to fish? What if that shelf that we all love to fish on, where the deep pool is in the shelf and the fish come out from underneath the shelf and they come up and eat your dry fly, or they come up from underneath that branch and come eat your dry fly, right? What if that's not there? We all know that seasons change and it can bring serious floods or serious droughts, and sometimes that underground cover and makeup can disappear. What do you do when that happens? These are all valid topics of concern. When you get to your honey hole and you're like, I haven't caught a single fish out of here, or this water doesn't look fishable. I don't see how any fish could be here. That's when you have to employ a different tactic, and that usually means fishing a hopeless place or an area that you just haven't fished before. This brings a couple good things that could happen. You could throw a fly at a fish that is used to seeing squirmy wormies and mop flies and egg flies, but it doesn't see midges or pheasant tails that often. Or you might be throwing streamers, and this might be a sizable snack for this fish that he hasn't seen in a while, because no one comes through there and fishes. It's rare that a bait of that size comes through there, right? These are like big things that could happen if you fish an area that you haven't fished before. If we're talking on a river, that's going to be the outcome most of the time. You're going to be able to say, wow, there was a fish there, and I'm not sure how or why, but there was. And oh gosh, it was the biggest fish that I've ever caught out of here. Or I didn't know that browns were in here. I thought this was only rainbow water, right? Fish like different things, and sometimes we have to adapt to that. So break the norm of fishing the same holes over and over again. Check out streams that you might get some weird looks at because you're the only person in the parking lot walking around with the fly rod, waders, the whole nine. My favorite is wading in the lake at your local apartment complex when you don't live there. Not only will it feel awesome to find a fish in these different places, it will challenge you in the tactics that you use. And that's going to be a lot of the answers to a lot of these questions is what tactics are you using? How can you change these tactics? What can you do to show them something different? It's going to change you or challenge you to change those tactics, and it's going to get you out of your comfort zone. So next time you're out, don't fish the same hole. Go explore new water. If you are going to fish the same river, explore a new part of it. Go where people tell you there aren't fish at, and prove to them that there are fish there. So this next topic is kind of controversial. And I mean it in a good way, but it can be controversial at times. This past October, I took a trip up to the North Shore of Lake Superior, right outside of the Duluth area. We were fishing pretty much, or had planned to fish pretty much every tributary that we could find, from there to Grand Marais, which is about, 100 miles from Canada. So we were pretty far up there, but we get there and the rivers are low and there's not a lot of fishermen out, but we run into, a lot of tourists, an unusually high density of non-fishermen. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with watching someone fly fish. In my opinion, it can be quite relaxing and somewhat elegant. You have the rhythmic motion of the back cast and the front cast, and then how the angler can pick the line up and flip it oh so smoothly for a mend, and then that quick moment when they set the hook for a hook set. It can be quite relaxing, I guess, if you're a huge nerd like I am. Sorry. But, again, back on topic, some of these people were just getting way too close and just not paying attention to the fact that I'm slinging 30 feet plus of line out with very sharp hooks on them, and they are about one wind gust away from a new nose piercing or belly button, depending on where it lands at. And I don't think anyone really wanted to be made more aerodynamic in that moment, so, it can be a challenge. After a while, I just packed up my gear and moved to a different spot. And one of the tourist people asked me, this water looks so good. What do you usually catch out of here? Why are you moving? This is such a great day to fish. And I just talked to them for a little bit and kindly reply with, I didn't have luck there today. It looks like it might just be a little bit too busy, or, a lot of wind coming in through here right now because people are moving in and out. And then I just, I find my next spot. That's a really kind way to say, hey, leave me alone, without looking like a complete a-hole. And we want to not look like an a-hole as much as we can to people, because people are our pretty much link to keeping public land, and we need to make sure we keep the people happy who own those land or the people happy who are visiting. But, more often than not, these people are just interested in what you're doing, and they don't have the slightest awareness at all of what it takes to do what we do. They just think it's, oh, this is a pretty spot to go to, and oh, wow, look at that, he's a fly fisherman. They're not being malice in any way. However, you get to the people who are doing this in the water, and that's where you really run into a little bit of an issue. So, I have a general rule of thumb. Well, I guess I have two general rules of thumb, right? If I'm on a trip with someone, I try to place them in a spot where I know that there's fish at, but I also try to respect the other anglers on the water, because at the end of the day, we're fishing public water. We're not fishing private water, and this can sometimes cause arguments. But I try not to put my people in that situation. If someone is in a hole that I want to take my client into, I'll just simply find a different hole and come back to it. Most of the time, if someone's already there, you don't want to jump in right when they leave anyway, because if you're throwing the same thing they're throwing at it, fish are just not gonna react to it. But my second rule of thumb is, if I'm fishing by myself, and I mean this in the nicest way, if I'm fishing by myself and I could double haul to you, and I'm talking like double haul with nymphs or small streamers, you're way too close to me. And that is a problem. And this is sometimes referred to in our community as high holing or low holing. And just for a real brief description of what that is, if you're trying to drift an area of about 10 feet, and someone sneaks in 6 feet to your left or 6 feet to your right, you're only drifting 4 foot. Your flies may not be getting down to where the fish are, right? Your flies may not be swinging out to where the fish are. You may not be able to hit the structure in the water that that's there, because someone else is throwing their rig there or allowing their drift to happen there. It's an a-hole move, and you shouldn't do it. You should respect other anglers on the water, but that's just my opinion. However, this is pretty much acceptable if you're doing it with your buddies, especially if one of them is catching a lot of fish. Just pop on over there, sometimes stomp in the water. But I'm not responsible for anything that may happen there. You may get disowned or pushed in, or left at the boat ramp next time, or told to wake up at the wrong time, or come to the wrong place. There are a lot of things that could happen. So I'm in any way not endorsing this. But, the best way that I found to handle this is, if it's happening to you, just catch all the fish. Just catch them all. If you're catching them in that area, catch them, right? This is going to drive people nuts. And if you decide, these people are way too close to me, I need to move to a spot that you saw that they were at, or a spot upstream or downstream of them that doesn't look like it holds fish, and catch fish out of there. It will drive them absolutely nuts. You'll find out that they're kind of chasing you around wherever you go. You've got this pack of bozos behind you who are trying to high hole you to try to get to the fish that you're going for, and they never can do it. One of my favorite things to do when someone asks me after they've been trying to high hole and low hole me all day is, hey, what were you catching those fish on? And I tell them something that it's completely irrelevant to what I was actually catching them on. I've told someone before that I was catching trout on a Crazy Charlie. Stock trout on a Crazy Charlie. That's a bonefish fly. It will probably work, but I wasn't doing it. One of my other favorite responses is, it was just a bare hook before he jumped on it. It's a comical way to relieve tension, and then I just walk away, tell them have a good day, whatever. So don't high hole people, don't low hole people. It's not a good look. It's not a good look. Don't do it. But be nice. It's best for the community. I'm moving on to my next question. For the last question today, we're going to talk about essential gear for a day trip. You'll see I have this backpack here beside me, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I get asked this question a lot as a guide, as someone who fly fishes. People ask me, what what do I need to bring? What kind of gear do I need to bring? And sometimes I respond with a pretty vague answer, and I just say, oh, just the essentials will get you started. And that confuses a lot of people, rightfully so. It's pretty vague. But I will follow that up usually with a probing question about, what and where are you trying to fish at? If you're going on a trip with me, my answer usually is nothing. I will have everything you need, rods, reels, waders, all that good stuff. The only thing I do ask that you bring is some patience and willingness to try and learn. I might have you doing something out of your comfort zone. I might be doing something out of my comfort zone. Might be doing something out of our zone. Who knows? Yeah, that's all you got to bring if you're going on a trip with me. Pretty simple there. However, a lot of people are asking me this question when they're trying to figure out for themselves. And so I like to think of these 3 questions when I am attempting to go fish somewhere. Question 1, I say, what am I targeting? Question 2, how long will I be there / how far is the spot from me? Or how far is the spot from my car? And then question 3 is what information is available to me? So we can really tend to overpack sometimes, and this can make simple day trips extremely complicated. You end up being the guy who's putting on his waders outside of the car. When you open the trunk up, you got rods all over the place, you got bags all over the place, reels all over the place. There's stuff everywhere, and it can make things more confusing than it needs to be. So let's unpack this a little bit. Looking at step 1, figure out what fish you're going after. You're not going to bring bass flies to go fish for trout. You're not going to bring a 5-weight rod if you're going out in the ocean to fish for tarpon, right? That's going to influence the gear you bring pretty heavily. So figure that out first. The size of the fish that you're going after. Most trout you can catch on a 3-weight and a 2-weight. You don't necessarily need a 5 or a 6. So ask yourself that question, figure it out. Step 2 is ask yourself how long you're planning to fish and the accessibility in the area. How long will I be there? How far is the spot away from me or my car? The last thing you want to do is overpack, lug around this heavy ass pack and catch 0 fish because the pack was too heavy, you didn't want to move, you were just stuck on this area, constantly trying to figure out what flies to throw. No. Don't think about all that stuff. Just solely think about, how long you're going to be there, how far is the spot away from you. And that is going to play really well into step 1 because for me, if I'm taking a trip out into Western North Carolina, it's about 2 hours away from me. If I'm going by myself, I need probably 1 or 2 rods, depending on what I'm fishing, and then 2 reels, sometimes an extra spool, depending on what I'm doing. And then just the flies that you want, the flies, the stuff that you need. And we'll get into that a little bit in my choices there. But a really big one that you don't think about is accessibility. How far is it away from your car? What's going to happen if you fall in and get wet? That's going to influence you to bring maybe an extra shirt or a jacket or maybe a towel is a small towel. ShamWow! It is a nice thing to have in your bag in case you fall in. Socks are a huge one. You can find everything that I keep in my bag down below in the description of this video. There'll be a link to my pack list, and it'll show you exactly what I'm bringing for every trip right now. And it will probably change in about January, but it will have everything that's inside of this bag. And then step 3 is use your resources. This can be almost as vague as the essentials, because a lot of times people don't know how to look for stuff. You hear people all the time say, "Oh, well, just look on Google Maps," and I hate that answer more than anything, because Google Maps doesn't show you where private land is and where public land starts. Google Maps doesn't show you where you can access the river at. You can see it. You don't know how far it is from where you have to actually go or where the put-in is, right? Now, to the trained eye, you can find that kind of stuff. Maybe not the public or private land, but you can find a put-in. But to the untrained eye, you can't, and it will infuriate you and kind of lock you into just fishing places that you're used to fishing, or not even going on a trip. But Google is a great resource, but I use Google to find my wildlife websites, right? So the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission, which I'll leave this link down here in the bottom as well, it has a interactive map that you can put in the species, the type of fishing you want to do, any counties that you particularly want to fish in. All of that good stuff is available in the interactive map. Then you have a North Carolina hatch chart, which breaks down month by month the bugs that are hatching in the rivers and streams in North Carolina, along with the size and patterns of flies you should use to match that hatch. And when it usually happens. It's a really great resource. Finally, one of my favorite resources on there is the stocking updates and timeline. For me personally, I run all of my trips from October 1 to about March. My hot season is between January and March. We catch a lot of fish then because it's really cold and no one else is on the river. But, you can see exactly when the NCWRC is coming by and doing the stockings based off of the county that you're in. Again, all of this will be available down below if it's something that you're wanting to look into. Call your local shop too. Give them a call. Say, hey, I've done some research. Here's the bodies of water I want to fish. Have you guys had any luck out there? And if they're a reliable shop, they're probably going to say, yeah. We've had luck out there. Or, that hasn't been the best spot for us in the past. There certainly are fish there, but we just haven't seen them recently. A shop will give you a lot of information if they're a reliable shop and a trustworthy shop, but you're going to have to dig for it a little bit. They're not going to spoon feed it for you. So putting that all together, now you have an idea of the type of gear you got to bring. So now you got to figure out how you're getting into there, right? And that's where this pack comes from. I personally like to use a backpack. This is the Orvis Bug Out backpack. It's got pockets all over the place. This thing is awesome. But I use this with my Orvis chest pack, and that connects right up here. That's all I carry. A lot of times I carry all of my essential gear in the chest pack up front, so my 2 fly boxes, extra leaders that I've made, floating nippers, or an extra pair of nippers, and my mitten clamps, indicators if I'm using an indicator. Anything of that essential nature goes in the chest pack, tippet, etc. And then in this, I keep, non-essential gear, but it's nice to have. Reel cases for your reels, and then maybe an extra sinking tip if you have it, a coat, some snacks. Extra tippet goes along here that I don't have on my tippet bar, but in case I run out, I have some I can put on, right? All of that stuff I try to keep in the non-essential section of the pack, to where when I want to take a break and get a beer out, it's right here in the bag. Another essential item that I keep in here, and it might be in there right now. I don't know if I've taken it out. Is chapstick. I cannot overemphasize how important chapstick is. Just wants to keep coming out there. On a cold day in Western North Carolina, or really anywhere, the wind can really rip across your face and just will cause you to have a horrible time. So bring that chapstick with you. Well, that about wraps it up for the body of this month's episode. But before we leave, let's talk about this month's fly fishing forecast. This is a segment where we go over the forecast or the fishing report for different areas in North Carolina, depending on what season we're in. We're going to start coastal and then move our way across the map. Be pretty quick. So from November to January, if you're fishing on the coastal North Carolina, you really want to be preparing for the speck and the drum run. Specs are going to be coming in around January when that water gets cold, brings them up. And they're a blast. I catch them on popping shrimp, catch them on clousers, I catch them on like little gotcha shrimp imitations. Ton of fun. You might not catch a lot. You might not catch anything of size, but you will catch some small ones, and probably a lot of them depending on where you are. Moving on in central North Carolina, bass are starting to move in a little bit, so low and slow. You might be able to catch one or two on top right now, but the later it gets in the year, the more low they're going to go and kind of start to not necessarily hibernate. They'll come out on the warm days, but if you are going to want to fish for them, you're probably going to want to fish something heavy, maybe on a sinking tip line, smallmouth and largemouth. A lot of fun. Still got a lot of fight them in the wintertime. And then moving on over to Western North Carolina, it's delayed harvest season's in full swing. We're having trips out the wazoo right now. I'm actually completely booked up for the rest of the year, and we'll be reopening for slots at the end of January. So if you're interested, the link is down below where you can book a trip with me, and I can hopefully get you onto some fish. But what's working right now until about January are going to be eggs, squirmy wormies, mott flies, patchworm eggs, and micro streamers. I would say tie up a couple of those patterns or buy a couple of those patterns at your local shop, and you should have a good day. You shouldn't have any problems now. As the colder the water gets, you are going to want to naturalize your patterns a little bit. Start carrying more midges, rainbow warriors, pheasant tails, copper johns maybe, but really more on the pheasant tail and the midge side. Carry the copper johns and the rainbow warriors for attractive patterns or something heavy, right? Because midges are pretty light sometimes. So, that wraps it up for the fly fishing monthly fly fishing forecast. Thank you to everyone who's listened. I've truly enjoyed spending this time with you wherever you are this evening. If you did enjoy this month's episode, please feel free to leave a review. 5 stars, baby. 5 stars. And if you think you have a family friend that might enjoy this, please share this podcast with them. It'd be pretty cool to have more people tuning in every month. And if you have any questions, again, please feel free to shoot me an email or a DM anywhere on the socials that I listed below, and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer you. This podcast can be found on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and on YouTube. So, that's all I got for you guys. I'll see you next month. We might have a surprise episode coming up in the making about what to buy your favorite fly fisherman for Christmas. So, ladies, keep your eye out for that one. But that's all I got. So, you guys take care and tight lines.